Welcome to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us for this very special program today. Barbra Lee discussing her documentary film, Speaking Truth to Power. We wish to thank and acknowledge Carl Dickerson, longstanding board member and vice chairman of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall Board of Directors, for underwriting screening links for the documentary on Barbra Lee. And if you weren't able to see the film with us, it's having its LA theatrical release starting tomorrow at the Laemmle Royal Theater. And Congresswoman Barbra Lee will participate in a Q&A following the 4:30 p.m. screening of Barbra Lee, Speaking Truth to Power, at the Royal on Saturday, August 21st. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Barbra Lee, who is joined by Abby Ginzberg, the film director of the documentary, and Dr. Emerald Archer, moderator, who is Associate Professor of Political Science and Director of the Center of Advancement of Women at Mount St. Mary's University. Let me turn this over to you, Dr. Archer. We are so looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a real honor to be able to host or to be involved in this conversation. So I want to dig in right away. So my first question is, of course, for you, Congresswoman Lee. I'm a trained political scientist. I'm also a Californian. I am very familiar with your story, and the film just brings out complexities of your life and advocacy, of which I was unaware. But there may be folks on the call who are not as aware of your story as I am. So I want to start with you and ask, how would you characterize and describe your journey up until this point and your impact?
Well, thank you, Dr. Archer. Thank you, Kim. And let me just give a shout out to Carl and Jean Dickerson, and of course, my son, Tony Lee and Angie Lee, for their, first of all, their love and their commitment and their tremendous vision and leadership in Los Angeles and throughout the country. This is a family affair. And I just want to say that Carl and Jean and I, we shared grandchildren, Jordan, Joshua, and Jonah. So I'm really proud to be with the you today with the Los Angeles World Affairs Council, and their involvement is heartwarming. And let me tell you, my journey is not unlike, and my life is not unlike most African-American women. We take different paths, but part of who we are is being persistent to challenge the injustices in America. And so as an African-American woman, I learned early on, which is in the film and also in my autobiography, that when my mother was born, when I was born, my mother needed a cesarean section. The hospital would not admit her because she was Black, and she almost died. Long story about how she finally got admitted, but it was too late then for a C-section. They did not know what to do, so they ended up yanking her into the emergency room, not the delivery room. She couldn't have a C-section, trying to figure out how to save her life and how to get me into this world. And so they used forceps and pulled me out. I almost didn't breathe. I almost didn't get here, and my mother almost died. So that's my entry into this world. And so how could I not have a life that was about addressing the total traumatic experiences of racism and sexism and gender inequality, women's health, you know, all of the issues that we deal with each and every day. And so most Black women have all of these same, they may not have had the same, well, look at what's happening now with Black maternal mortality and infant mortality rates for Black women. It's outrageous. And so Black women have had to struggle and to meet these struggles and to address these challenges. And I always like to quote Dr. Maya Angelou. She says, and still we rise. And so that's kind of my story. I'm going to fight to dismantle and disrupt structures that are oppressive and discriminatory, sexist, racist, and I'm going to still keep going.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah. And for Abby, as a longtime observer of Congresswoman Lee, is there anything you'd add or emphasize in the description of her story that she just gave us?
Well, I think, there's a line that actually I don't think is in the film, maybe it's in the trailer, where Barbara says, I think of myself more as a public servant than a politician. And let me say that I think that that is a true characterization of her. I think that sort of self-awareness. So it is, I mean, we've had other discussions while we've been talking about the film where people say, the thing that politicians care most about is getting reelected. That is not Barbara's, number one, it's not her issue because she gets reelected by 80% plus in her district every time. But it's not what she's thinking about. She is thinking about the issues. She is thinking about how to make a difference. She is thinking about what issues are emerging from Oakland that affect, all people across the country, and particularly African American and Latino communities or Native American communities. So she's very different. And I think that's really what led me to kind of want to make this film, is that she is not a typical politician, but she has been uniquely successful both in working across the aisle and in getting people who are Republicans to join with her on, specific things that they can agree on. And there's another thing that's a theme in the film, which is don't go small, go big. So you have something to negotiate with. That's a lesson that Barbara learned from Shirley Chisholm and from Ron Dellums. I mean, don't go for what you're willing to settle for as your opening bit. You've got to go for a big picture change so that when you get whittled down, there's still something worth fighting for in the package. So in all those ways, I feel like Barbara is really quite unique. And that, I just want to say, is why I made this film about her. We had no idea when we started that this film would break just as we're leaving Afghanistan. And everybody is remembering Barbara's speech on the floor of Congress 4 days after 9/11. So the timing of this is unique. But the reason I made it is because she is so much more a public servant than a politician. And I feel like that is what other politicians should aspire to.
Excellent. That's right. Boldness. We see boldness from Congresswoman Lee all the time. And I want to follow up on what you just mentioned about Afghanistan. So we're living in an era where we need great moral courage, right? And Congresswoman Lee, your story exemplifies that. You were famously the lone congressional no vote on the authorization of military force after 9/11. My question for you is, how did you summon the courage to step up and stand alone in that moment? And then what advice do you have for anyone who is trying to cultivate that kind of courage in the face of immense pressure?
Well, I never saw it really as courageous. When I saw that authorization, first of all, the context is the country was in mourning. We were grieving. We were angry. 3,500 people were killed. I was sitting in the Capitol early that morning in a meeting, had to evacuate. We were told a plane was coming in. Lo and behold, my chief of staff's cousin, Wanda Green, was on flight 93. They took that plane down in Pennsylvania, and I could have been killed if they hadn't done that. And so all of this was going on with me personally. So I'm not unlike everyone else during that moment. I was terrified. I was angry, and I was very sad. And I was thinking about all the people who lost their family members, the communities that were devastated now, the long-term effects, health effects of what took place. So it was a terrible moment. But I also knew that in a terrible moment, and when you're when you're mourning and when you're when you're grieving, I'm a psych major and I'm a clinical social worker, MSW by profession. You don't make hard decisions when you're in mourning, when you're grieving, when you're emotional. This authorization came 3 days later, and it was 60 words. It was a blank check, and it was so vague. It was pathetic. And I knew, and I talked to many constitutional attorneys then, that what we were doing was just giving Congress's responsibilities over to then President Bush, but any subsequent president. You just don't do that. If people elect you to do your job, you just don't do that. So I tried to get them to redo it. They wouldn't do it. And so I had no option. And it was a hard vote, but I had to draw on my faith, because I do believe that we have to really be very careful when we engage in more violence. I had to think about the moral and ethical response, and knew that we had to respond now, because I always say I'm not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. My dad was a military man, 25 years, lieutenant colonel, served in World War II, Korea. Was part of the 92nd Battalion in World War II, supporting the Normandy invasion. I mean, he was a military man. I was raised in a military family. And he was the first one who called me and said, do not, he said, that was the right vote. He said, do not send these troops in harm's way with no exit strategy, with no plan, with no understanding of what's taking place, who the, quote, enemy is. Yes, we've got to respond, but do not do it so quickly. And that's what I said on the floor. So I don't think, you know, when people say it was courageous, but I put all that together and then went to the memorial services, the film shows, and when the Reverend Nathan Baxter said, as we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. Well, I was pretty settled with voting. Of course, it was a hard decision to come to, knowing, I didn't know if I was going to be the only one or not, but I knew that all hell was going to break loose because I know this country and I know people believe that you don't have, many people, that they don't understand democracy, and integral to democracy is the right to dissent. And I knew that was gonna, you know, the lot was gonna break loose. So then, you know, I just had to be ready for the consequences. And that's all. And I think for everyone, you have those moments in life, whatever it is, that you have to say, I'm taking this risk. I know what the consequences are, but it's important enough for me, based on my moral conscience, based on what the Constitution requires of me as an elected official, based on what I think could happen in terms of an open-ended, in this instance, open-ended war that could lead to havoc, knowing the history of Afghanistan, there's no military solution. So I had to just put all that together. That was the only option for me. So to me, you know, what can I say? And I think everyone has those moments in life where you have to kind of just know what your bottom lines are and then stand for that.
Yeah. And I would be remiss not to ask you about your thoughts and feelings as we watch what feels like a tragic exit to this story. What are your thoughts 20 years on, right, when you see American troops exiting and possibly leaving allies behind?
Well, it's a tragic exit, and I worry about this. And it's outrageous, the execution of it. And the president's absolutely correct that he had no option but to do what he did, recognizing the Taliban was moving in. 2,500 troops that Donald Trump left there. How could they get beat back what was taking place? And in fact, we know that the president would have had to insert thousands, maybe tens of thousands of troops in harm's way. And our troops have done everything we asked them to do. And so, and if there's no military solution, and if you know 20 years we'd be in the same place or worse, then he made the right decision. But the planning around the execution of this is mind-boggling. And so we are going to hold hearings to understand what happened. Was the intelligence wrong? Did we have the correct intelligence? I suspect, and it's coming out now, that maybe some of the Afghan security forces were conspiring with and colluding with many of the Taliban. Who knows? But it was just it's not good. So as chair of the subcommittee on appropriations that funds humanitarian assistance, our refugee accounts and what have you, I'm working day and night to try to make sure that we get everyone out of Afghanistan. People who help the Americans, we need to honor our commitment to them and transport them to safe harbor. We need to get all Americans out. We need to make this evacuation go smoothly. We need to provide escorts and people to get through with these checkpoints, which I'm worried about women and children getting through. And so we have a heck of a lot, a whole of government response, all hands on deck, and none of us can take a break until this is done, until every single person who needs to get out of Afghanistan gets out. And so now, looking back in 20 years, I'm just saying, yeah, well, this is the result of a military occupation that you could not win, first of all. And then secondly, my main concern is making sure that lessons learned, but that we move forward and get everyone out to safety.
Yeah, thank you so much for your advocacy. Abby, I want to continue on with the advocacy piece. And, you know, you've dedicated your filmmaking to social and racial justice issues over the last 30 years plus. Why? Like, why did you choose to take on this?
Oh, come on. That's an easy question to answer. It's like, you know, if you're going to spend years making a film about either somebody or an issue, it better be something that you care deeply about. So, you know, I started my career as a lawyer working on social justice issues. And so when I transitioned into being a filmmaker, you know, what I brought with me was access to some really interesting people who themselves were really dedicated to social justice. And so in profiling them, you know, I get to choose what issues in their career I'm going to highlight. And that was true also with Barbra. So I have a long-standing personal commitment to and work around, you know, HIV and AIDS issues. So that, why did that make this into this film? Because I care about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things about sort of the choices you make is you know, as a filmmaker, I feel like I'm looking to make some kind of correspondence between the things I care about in the world, the role of history as it affects, you know, some of my characters. And I'm trying to do something other than tell their, you know, I'm not telling their biography or their CV. I'm trying to paint a portrait of somebody who has combined a certain kind of activism and commitment to social justice in whatever life work they find themselves in. So Barbra's my first politician, but I've done a South African judge and, you know, anti-apartheid activist. And I did a film about Thelton Henderson, who was the first Black attorney in the Civil Rights Division. So I had to talk about what did it mean to be Black in Birmingham in 1962 and be the link between Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement and the Kennedy Justice Department. That was not an easy task. And it was because he was at that intersection at that historical moment that so much else about, you know, how he ended up seeing the world and being a judge and so on came into play.
Right.
So I think for me, as an activist and as a social justice, you know, believer or whatever, someone who's committed to it, I am always looking for the places where these things connect. And Barbra was kind of perfect because with Barbra, the list of issues that she cares about, the list of issues that I care about was very long. And we had to kind of reduce it so that the film didn't feel like a laundry list of these issues, but felt like you could feel what motivated her to get involved in the first place. You could feel how different her advocacy was because of her personal experiences as a single mother, et cetera. And you could feel the ways, I'm now talking about, you know, Barbra's role vis-a-vis Oakland as being a little bit of a canary in a coal mine around issues of equity and communities across this country. So when COVID vaccines are not getting to people of color, Barbra is leading the fight about that to try to see what else can be done, put more money into trusted, you know, speakers around this, et cetera. And so often, I believe, you can look at the work that Barbra Lee is doing and find a path to better, effective, I don't know, you know, sort of visible social efforts that are going on to try to really change things. And that's what led me to Barbra. And I think within the film, you see how her leadership ends up making a difference.
Okay, that's great. So you preempted me on my next question, but I want you to pull the curtain back a little bit. So you just answered why maybe you chose Barbra Lee as your kind of focus, but pull the curtain back on how did you develop a working relationship with this Congresswoman who is so busy?
Ask her. I think we have to start with Barbra explaining what a reluctant participant she was, and then I get to be the persistent, come on, Barbra, we can do this. We can climb this ladder together. Come on. But she was not dying to be part of this. She was A, way too busy, and B, did not really have a vision of what this film was going to do in the world. Really didn't see it, you know? So I really want to defer to Barbra to say, you know, what her resistance was based on, and then I'll talk about, you know, why I just knew if I hung in there long enough, maybe I could convince her to do it. But initially, it was quite difficult to convince her.
Yeah,
and that's what you said.
And Abby knows this, but Dr. Archie, in addition to being too busy, I'm too private. That 98% of my life is public, right? So that zone of privacy, I mean, here now she's invading my, you don't even want to start cursing, privacy. And I really guard that, right? So it was like I was an unwilling subject. It took Abby twice as long to do this film because I resisted. And because I'm so busy and say, oh, I'm too busy for that. And then she'd show up. Say, how did she know I was here? I don't think we had any schedule except that one interview. And then she shows up in Alabama. She shows up in Wisconsin. She shows up everywhere. I said, what the heck is going on here? You know, I mean, nothing of this was planned by me. So she just, and Abby's a phenomenal filmmaker, but she had twice as hard a job with me than with probably her other subjects, and I consider myself a subject. And so it was just really hard for her. But that shows what persistence and commitment and skills and brilliance can do. But I really, honest to God, it was like grueling for me.
And,
so much.
When I'd show up, you'd think she was, arriving for a root canal. She'd be like, oh my God, you're here? So it wasn't, I mean, we have built our relationship since the film has been made. But when I would arrive, let's say in Milwaukee, her feeling was the dentist just showed up with his drill, or her drills.
How did she know I was here? What's wrong with you guys? It was bad. I mean, I was really bad. It was like horrible, really. But she did it.
I knew from day one that if I could just not get her to not say no, she didn't even really have to say yes. She just had to not say no. That I had the vision for the film, and I knew that I could, I thought I could do a good a good job on her story, and I sort of from the beginning I desperately cared about getting it right. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, and that was, something that my editor and I had to work out between ourselves, what getting it right meant. But somewhere, it's like, sometimes you feel called to do these films. Mm-hmm. You're sitting somewhere and you hear about something and you think, if I don't make this film, nobody else is going to do it. So you sort of raise, the expectations for yourself and you say, okay, I'm going to do this. So whenever that spirit hit me that maybe I should make this film about Barbra Lee, it went from the spirit hitting me to it feeling a little bit like a calling. Yeah. And that made it a little bit easier for me not to just let it go when she was resistant. And let me say, I have approached many people over the years who have really said, absolutely not. Barbra must have just not said it strongly enough, because I've had to walk away from a lot of films just because the person is absolutely not going to participate. Right. And you can't do a film like this without the participation. Yeah. So even though it took longer, Barbra did participate, and she participated willingly when she had to. And the rest of the time I was the dentist. Okay, but we got a good film of it, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but I think Abby's, in my faith tradition, it's the spirit mood, okay? And I think my spirit was connected to her spirit, and that's why I probably didn't cuss her out every time. But sometimes. But also, just a little mundane point, just really show you how it got to me. When I do interviews, usually before COVID, you go to the station, they put makeup on you and all that stuff. Man, I didn't have 1 second to have any heads up to put any makeup on. So I see myself in this film and I hate how I look. I mean, it got to be that crazy. Still, it's like I could not get to a makeup artist, not once in this entire film. You're now done this documentary with me in my natural state.
It's amazing.
So all I can say is it never crossed my mind that she didn't look beautiful in every shot. So that's me. I think she looks fabulous. So, and independent documentary filmmakers don't have money for a makeup artist. So that's just the other reality of how we work. We're like,
not money, no time either. I would never have, if I had known Abby was going to show up, if I had known I had to get made up for a shot, that would have tipped me off that she was coming, first of all, and then that would have taken up more time. So it just fell into place au naturel.
It's fantastic. So we can definitely just live with a beautiful film that was created. Now, Congresswoman Lee, I have the honor of teaching at the only women's university in Los Angeles. And I know you are a graduate of a women's college, Mills College in Oakland. I have to ask you how your experience at a women's college informed your aspirations, your leadership, your work today.
Sure, and I'm in the struggle now to keep Mills open as a women's college, a degree granting college. But I don't think I would have made it without Mills College, because I was on public assistance, wanted to go back to school, had 2 young boys. Again, going back to why I'm fighting so hard for childcare, I have that personal lived experience. they had to go to class with me. Mills was a very welcoming college for, quote, Mary Atkins students. Those were the students who were living outside of the campus, primarily either married or single with kids. So I was able to take my children to class with me. And I always say Tony and Craig learned statistics better than I did, because I didn't like C's and I got a C once, and they had to sit through 2 classes, through 2 semesters of stat so I could get a B. And the professors and the students at Mills were really quite remarkable in understanding my plight. And they would look out for the kids when they went out to the streams. They would watch them, you know, and it was just like a family taking care of my children, because I didn't have money for childcare. And I never would have been able to make it through another college had it not been such a women's college who understood the plight and the challenges of women like myself. And then, of course, that's where I met Shirley Chisholm, invited her, first Black woman elected to Congress. And I was in a course where I was going to have to do field work in a campaign, presidential campaign. I said, no, flunk me. A woman was my professor, Dr. Fran Mullins, I'll never forget it. And I was going to flunk her class, first time ever. And she said, okay, well, you don't do the work, you flunk. So Shirley Chisholm came, said she was running for president. And I decided, after a long conversation with her, when she took me to task to register to vote, to get involved, I actually got involved in her campaign. I passed my class. I got an A in the class, went to Miami as a Shirley Chisholm delegate. And the beauty of Mills is that it affords women the opportunity to do field work. I have interns in my office from Mills. They're phenomenal. They get class credit. During that period, we had what we call J terms, where students could go abroad during January to study, and I was president of Black Student Union, and this is a side note, but they never allowed students a credential course to go to Africa, so I fought the administration. Boom, we got a class in the English department for Mills students to go to Ghana, and they got course credit. They went to Ghana for a whole month, and I couldn't go because I had no money. No one knew that, but I actually raised money for 17 young girls to go to Ghana in January. And so Mills affords those type of unique educational opportunities that allows you to put together the theory and the practice, allows you to grow and develop as a woman and as who you want to be in the world regardless. And of course, it has a mission of social justice, gender equity, and really empowers women to live up to who they are and to shatter the barriers that are out there to make it possible for other women to move forward.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Now, I want to ask both of you, this is a question for both of you, but a little different twist. So the film beautifully shows how, Congresswoman, you have mentored many people in Congress, right? From Ayanna Pressley to Cory Booker to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I want you to talk a little bit more about that mentorship and how you continue to mentor progressive voices in our Congress. And then Abby, I'd love for you to comment on how you chose the speakers who spoke in the film, right, to frame the story of Barbra Lee and her legacy, because the voices are incredible, from John Lewis, right, to Senator Claiborne. So talk to me about your mentorship, Congresswoman, and then how you chose these voices, Abby.
Well, let me tell you how proud I am, first of all, of the squad, and for so many women coming to Congress, breaking these barriers and showing up and saying, we're not waiting, we're going to move forward. And so many of them, now for a long time, I was one of the few African-American women who was on the progressive side of the party. Now we have many more. And so I would always stake out the turf, like in current example of repealing the Hyde Amendment, which denies abortion freedom, abortion care to low-income women, women of color. That passed in the mid-70s. I was the only one saying repeal Hyde when I came to Congress, and everyone, ooh, that's the holy grail. You don't talk about that in terms of abortion rights. I've just been building that support, building and building it. So when several members came, including Ayanna Pressley, to Congress, it's like, what? Let's repeal it now. I said, yes, let's do it. We did it. So now it's going, the bill is going to the Senate without the Hyde Amendment in terms of our appropriations bill. And so these women, and so I've been able, like, they'll call me day and night to ask me, should I do this, should I not, or how to do this, or they'll just be bold and say, will you, especially Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, will you do this with me? And I know that it's way out there, and she may take some heat, but I'm going to say yes. And one example was on the funeral expenses for those who have family members who died of COVID and didn't have enough money to pay. Okay, I was doing the legislation for that through the Appropriations Committee, which I serve on. And I get a call from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez saying she wanted to do something on this also. I said, well, why don't you do it? And I'm going to work with you to do it because I was going to do the same thing. Let's do it together. Guess what? We got it done together. Now, if we hadn't had that kind of organizing with myself and her, who knows what would have happened. So whenever they call me, 95% of the time, I know what it's about. Will you join like some really good, hardcore progressive legislation? I will say, yes, I'm glad you're doing it. And it shakes things up a little bit. Oh, Barbra Lee's on Ilhan's or AOC's bill or on Ayanna's bill or on Rashida's bill. Yeah, let's see how we can work it and get it done. And so it's really wonderful for me to have kind of like, they call me, you know what OG is?
Original gangster.
You know what, gangster. That's what they call me, and I feel good about that because I had to work gangster-like just to get to where I am.
Awesome, thank you. Abby?
So I mean, I think really what happened was once people learned from either from me or from Barbra Lee's staff, who maybe made an introduction or two, that I was making a film about Barbra, people like lined up wanting to talk to me. So it was not an issue. I did not have to fight hard. You know, John, I mean, I really believe in the thing about if you want something done, ask a busy person. I think John Lewis said yes first. And he was one of the busiest people on the Hill. And, you know, and when we actually got there to interview him, he and Barbra were holding a press conference on something that Trump was doing at that moment. And we just waited. It was like, you know, you had to wait, but people would show up. And once they were there, they were so happy to talk to me about Barbra and what she meant to them. And, you know, and so there was AOC, who's quite highly visible. At the time that I interviewed Ayanna, she was, you know, a relatively new member of Congress. People did not know who she was. She has really distinguished herself since. There's Lisa Blunt Rochester, who I personally am just a huge fan of and had met. And I really, you know, she someday could be the senator from Delaware. And I want people to know who she is. So part of my goal in this film was to, you know, shine a little spotlight on some of the people that I had the opportunity to interview. You know, I'm not sure everybody knew who Gregory Meeks was, but now he's the chair of a big subcommittee in the House. You know, so it's like I wanted as many of these people to share their, you know, kind of their journey with Barbra or what they had learned from her as a mentor. I knew that Barbra had had a meeting with AOC out in California before the 2018 election. And so I thought there was a good chance I would get AOC. Here's what happened with AOC. I show up. There was a stakeout outside of her office, but I'm on her schedule to be part of, you know, she's going to be interviewed by me. And it is the same day that Trump says to the squad they should all go back to the countries that they're from. So at the exact moment where I'm supposed to be interviewing her, she needs to be, you know, kind of discussing what her strategy with the other three members of the squad is to respond to Trump. And so I believe that there are many people in Congress who would have said to me, come back tomorrow, come back in a week. We cannot do it today. And I actually also believe it was because of her connection to Barbra and her willingness to want to help me that she just figured out how to do what she needed to do from 11 to 2. And then at 2 o'clock, I got my interview. So there's tremendous camaraderie that Barbra just described and, you know, a sense of gratitude from the young members of Congress to, you know, Barbra as an OG. And all that worked in my favor in terms of being the filmmaker for this film. And I just am extremely grateful to the ways in which Barbra has built those relationships. And I think you have to call out the other thing that I, you know, partially because I know these kids and I had interviewed them in other situations. The young people that Barbra brings from Oakland and who are members of, you know, kind of Oakland public schools to the civil rights tour, the year that we went and followed them, those kids were in the spotlight. I mean, John Lewis was being interviewed by them and they were speaking from the pulpit at the church of the 16th Baptist Church. I'm like, come on, that doesn't happen easily. And Barbra's role in mentoring them so that they're really the next generation coming up is also extremely important and is part of how she sees what she's doing in this world. So there's mentorship, and then there's, you know, another layer of mentorship, and she's engaged in both.
Oh, absolutely. And the film just really visualized that for the audience so well. So I have 100 more questions, but I don't want to hog it all. So I want to invite Jessica back to us so she can moderate the Q&A from the audience. Thank you, Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience again for joining us today. Before we jump into the questions, I just want to remind everyone that we are a member-supported and donation-supported organization. The recent impact of the Delta variant has impacted our plans to begin returning to in-person events, which is how we cover our expenses. It is currently uncertain when we will be able to resume in-person events. So therefore, we need our members and viewers' support more than ever through donations and by renewing their memberships. So please help us bridge the gap through this challenging time and go to our website, lawacth.org, and click on that donate button. Of course, if you're a member, you also get to take part in our complimentary members-only screenings like this film. So we greatly appreciate your help. And now let's get to those questions. Congresswoman, can Congress do anything at this time to make sure that paperwork is minimized for now and for the 80,000 Afghans who helped the U.S. to still get out?
Yes, they can. And what we're doing, first, we have oversight responsibilities. And so many of us are writing and talking to the administration about doing this right away. We're having oversight hearings also. But in addition to that, through my subcommittee, what I'm trying to do now is find out if they need more resources. If that's the problem, then we need to introduce a supplemental to increase the resources that are necessary. But also, we have to have a bill, which we're working on, to increase the cap, to raise the cap on refugees. Because right now, you know, Donald Trump probably just went, the cap on refugees was 0. We've increased it some, but certainly not enough to make sure that all of the Afghan allies who we relied on have an opportunity to get into the United States. So we have a major role in lifting that cap also.
Thank you so much. This next questioner says, our country was created with a majority rule government with a 2/3 majority used only in extreme cases. Should we return and rely on that method?
Should we return and rely on what message exactly was that?
Sorry. Majority rule versus 2/3 majority.
Oh, I support ending the filibuster. I mean, we've got to end it. It's archaic. It was passed, right at the end of slavery, and it is a way to stifle the voices of people who need full participation in this country. Just look at voting rights. I mean, right now, around the country, there's so many laws being passed to suppress the vote. Of course, it's targeted for people of color, African Americans, women, people who are disabled. It's targeted toward making sure that people have less opportunities to vote rather than more. To get the HR 1 bill passed, which again deals with voter suppression, it deals with getting the dark money out of politics, all of that. We need to pass HR 1 and we need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, HR 4. But in order to do that with the margin so close, you have to end the filibuster. You have to find a way around that. And so we're working each and every day to try to bring some semblance of democracy back into this country in terms of our rules on the Hill, given the filibuster, and whether that's reform them, set them aside, but we need to end it personally. And so Senator Schumer is working day and night to do that. But we've got to do it if we're gonna live up to our creed of liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. What do you see as the future of the Democratic Party with the more progressive members of Congress and those that are more establishment Democrats?
Well, that's good for the party. I mean, we're Democrats. People always say, oh, you guys don't have a singular message. We try to be unified, and I think Speaker Pelosi is phenomenal in unifying our Democratic caucus. The Democrats have different points of views, and what we have to do is make sure we bring consensus to those different points of views and not see it as a negative, but see it as a way to bring a third point of view. which really probably is the best place to be. But progressives, I co-chair the Progressive Caucus for many years. We have the largest caucus now in Congress. And much of what we see with the Biden administration, just look at infrastructure and how we are insisting that we have the care economy included, have the child tax rate extended, because we're trying to lift more children out of poverty. Look at what we're trying to do with, I mentioned childcare earlier. We need childcare for people so women can get back to work. Right now, so many women are out of the workforce, they can't get back to work because they don't have enough money for childcare. And so we've got to fix the care economy, and we've got to have a green climate piece in terms of energy efficiency, good, clean paying union jobs included. And so we have to have the hard infrastructure, but we have to have the human infrastructure component, because it takes people to build bridges. And if you have people who are sick, if you have people who don't have childcare, if you have people who have elders who can't get elder care and caregiving, then what do you do? So we've got to have both. It's been the Progressive Caucus that's been fighting to make sure that everyone in this country has a fair shot. And so we're sticking to our guns, and we're going to keep working with the Speaker, and we're going to make sure it happens. And so just know that Democrats are Democrats. And we respect each other's points of views. We always come to some kind of consensus about where we need to go, and we're going to do it again.
Thank you. Being more progressive, have you ever found that you have more allies on certain issues by reaching across the aisle to Republicans?
Most of the time I do. And I say that because Abby mentioned earlier about my negotiating strategies. Now believe you me, there's some really far right-wing Republicans, right? And I'm left of center. I'm a progressive, even though a lot of people don't know it, but I had a business for 11 years. I was a small business owner, and I had about 400 employees, good paying union jobs. So I understand economics and business development and all of that also. And so they're surprised when they find out I'm a small business owner. So I can talk about taxes, and I'm on the Budget and Appropriations Committee. So I find areas of common ground, right? And as a progressive, though, as Abby said, I start way out there, because they start way out there to the right. I'm going to start out there by saying universal, accessible health care for all, affordable health care for all, and start there. And we'll end up where we have something, because they want corporate ownership. They want healthcare to continue to be an industry. So we'll negotiate. When you see the film, you see Walter Jones, who was from North Carolina, the late Walter Jones, who we became really good friends. He was a Republican, and he was really right-wing. You would not know it in the film, because he talks about how we came together to try to repeal the authorizations for the use of military force. Now, that was a far left position, okay? And the Republican caucus, the Freedom Caucus, they're far right. But had I not started far left, Walter and I probably never could have gotten to where we are now. We got that authorization, the Iraq authorization, repealed in the House several times. Now the Senate moved it out of the committee. I've worked with Senator Kaine, and it's on the floor. Hopefully it'll get off the floor of the Senate, and President Biden will sign it, which he said he would. But that's an example of how you have, as a progressive, you've got to stake out the turf where you believe we should be. You have to have a vision. You have to know where you're going. You have to see life for all in terms of equity, in terms of justice, in terms of the American dream. Not just, well, maybe we'll just help them hang on until the next time, and throw out a crumb here or a crumb there. You have to say, no, we want good paying union jobs. No, we want businesses to have access to capital. We want our minority and small business owners and women business owners to be able to weed through this bureaucracy, to have the bureaucracy actually relax so that they can qualify and get these loans and grants. And so that's a far out position, but the Republicans are going to say no. But in the meantime, we were able to get, thanks to Congresswoman Maxine Waters, chairing the Financial Services Committee, a $60 billion set aside for community-based financial institutions during COVID, so that the small minority-owned, women-owned businesses can access that. So we never would have gotten there had we not started out where we started out. So, you have to see people, your adversaries, not your opponents, as adversaries, not enemies, even though sometimes, you just want to you know, say things that I'm not even gonna say here. But you have to see them as your adversaries, and you have to try to work with them to try to come up with solutions that are for the common good.
Thank you. This next questioner says, often the political right rail about gun violence in urban areas that have Black and brown people killing one another. It's regrettable that some of that is true. How can we expect others to value our lives if they see that we don't value one another?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And let me tell you, I'm no novice in this either. And I've always fought around violence prevention, ending violence, and insisting that my young people, I have the Martin Luther King Freedom Center for Nonviolence, that we mentor and train young people to understand that violence is not an option. Having said that, guns, we see too many guns on the streets of California, too many assault weapons. Guns are rampant, even though we have some of the strongest gun laws in the country. And so whether it's Black on Black, brown on brown crime, whether it's domestic terrorism, we've got to get the guns off of the street, and we have to have laws, gun safety measures that will allow people who legitimately want to hunt or whatever in terms of their Second Amendment rights, let them do that. But we have to have laws that prevent military style weapons from ending up in the streets of California and of America, where young people get them, and then you have this horrible thing that's taking place in terms of violence. Finally, let me just say we have to provide young people also, and a lot of these crimes are committed by Black on Black, brown on brown crimes by young people. We have to show them some alternatives. We have to make sure that they're valued, that they know we care about their lives, and teach them that gun violence is not the way, and that we have good schools, we have good housing, we care about you, we want to make sure you know that, and put these guns down. And so it's a big problem. We can't say it's not, but we have to, one, get these guns off the streets and get them out of the hands of people, including young people who don't need to have guns.
Thank you. Abby, this question's for you. How did you get funding together for Truth to Power, and what are you working on next?
Well, how I got funding for it is, a bunch of sort of foundations came through. The major funder was something called the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, and they are, based in Oakland and part of Barbara's constituents as well, and knew about her, and have funded other films of mine. So they came on board as the major funder. Another major funder was the Case and McLean Partners Foundation, and they're part of a law firm. They're a foundation attached to a law firm. Also with, let me say, this was a joint effort of people who knew about Barbara and wanted to sort of elevate her profile. That's really, a lot of the money was local. I don't even think I got any national money. So it was really from people who knew about her and support her and supported the idea, as I say, of raising her profile through this film. I don't even want to talk about my next film yet because I haven't even started shooting it, but it's going to be about diversity in juries. Let me just say that. It is pathetic that in Oakland you can have 100 people as part of a jury pool and there will not be one African American because there are so many reasons and barriers to get people into the jury pool. And that's kind of what I'm going to tell my next story about. But what I really want to talk about is how people can tell their friends about this film. Can I just say that?
Please.
Okay, so what is really important is that this film is going to be released nationally tomorrow. So I am now talking to you out there in the LA World Affairs Council. If you liked the film, assuming you saw it on the streaming platform that you just saw it on, please tell your friends and family to watch it either on Amazon Prime or on iTunes or at the theater, the Laemmle Theater that was mentioned earlier, where Barbara will be at the end of the day, after the 4:30 screening on Saturday, but it'll be at the Laemmle for a week. But our goal is, to have as many people as possible see this film and be inspired by Barbara. So I am speaking to all of you out there in, as I say, LA World Affairs Council land, and asking that you do us a favor, because the way that people know about films is when friends of theirs tell them. So you've seen it, or you at least were part of this conversation, and you have something to say. There's a new film about either a congresswoman you may have heard of or one you may not have heard of, but either way, go watch the movie and be inspired by Barbara's amazing integrity, her ability to be a public servant rather than a politician, and get behind getting the word about this film out there, because we need your help. So thank you. Amazon Prime and iTunes tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Well, we can probably end on that note. And for those of you who signed up for this talk, we are going to be sending you links so that you know where to access the film after this. I know you guys are doing a million talks today, so thank you so much for your time. Go see the movie this weekend. Congresswoman Lee, Director Ginzberg, thank you so much for this discussion. And Dr. Archer, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So I just want to thank both of you for making the time on this very busy day for having this conversation. For the audience, if you have not seen this film, you need to put it at the top of your screening queue. It is fantastic. You will not regret it. Tell everyone you know. Thank you to each and every audience member for attending. I am going to say goodbye for now. I hope you have a lovely day, and we hope to see you back at another conversation. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Congresswoman Abby, Emerald, thank you so much for your time.
Bye-bye. Nice being with you.
Enjoy.